Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Office Hours presented by the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. My name is Dr. Tisa Silver Kennedy, and I'm the founder of the center. And I thank you for joining me tonight as we talk a bit about student loans and what's happening in that space. So if you're joining us for the first time for Office Hours, I just want to give you a quick agenda of what these sessions typically look like. First, I'd like to give you a bit of information about the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness, then about office hours specifically. From there, we'll head straight into questions from our community, and most of those questions tend to revolve around the Limited Public Service Loan Forgiveness Waiver. So that's our featured topic for tonight. Then we'll revisit some frequently asked questions, and throughout, I'll reserve time for questions and answers. So if you have a question, please do drop it in the chat if you're joining me via Zoom, or leave a comment if you're joining us on Facebook Live. I'll be checking the comment feed from time to time. So let me tell you just a bit about the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. We're a relatively new organization that started in July of 2021, and we are building financial life skills, helping students to build those financial life skills and empowering them to thrive. Our model is based on 6 pillars of collegiate financial wellness, and we have a vision for all college and career school students in Maryland to achieve these pillars. The first is to be creditworthy. Second is to be ready. Third is to be resilient. Fourth is empowered. Fifth is successful. And sixth is thriving. So if you'd like to know more about the center, please visit us online at mccfw.org. Again, that's mccfw.org. Now, let's get into office hours. Office hours is a free semi-monthly virtual student loan clinic that is provided to give borrowers a free, trusted venue to help them navigate student loans and prepare for financial success beyond student loan repayment. I have personally advised students and families on the repayment of more than $75 million in student loans. That's a lot of money, but even with that expertise, every person's portfolio of loans is different. Every person's household situation is unique. So the information that you hear tonight is just that, is information. It's up to you as the borrower to take information from me, from other sources, and use that information to make an informed decision, one that is manageable and feasible for your household and makes the most sense for your financial situation. So office hours is presented for informational purposes only. Any information you hear tonight should not be construed as financial advice or legal advice. It's just free information about student loans from a trusted source. So let's dig right in. Oh, before I do that, I wanted to share with you all just a few resources from Maryland, because this is the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness, and Financial Education Month is coming up in April. I just wanted to mention 2 partners of mine. First, the Financial Empowerment Center at Prince George's Community College. They offer a suite of programs on lots of different personal finance topics, from credit and budgeting up to starting a small business and retirement. You can visit them through the website of Prince George's Community College, look for the Financial Empowerment Center, and view their workshops. They have a robust library of past events on their Facebook page. They have a lot of events coming up for this April in celebration of Financial Education Month. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the Annapolis Anne Arundel Financial Education Coalition. We have worked together to host a few events about the Limited PSLF Waiver in Anne Arundel County. The first event was last Wednesday. We'll have another one coming up virtually in April, and another in-person event at an Anne Arundel County Public Library branch in Odenton, Maryland, coming up in May. So I want to thank them for partnering with me to spread the word about the Limited PSLF Waiver, which is a life-changing opportunity for many federal student loan borrowers who work in public service to get closer to having their debt forgiven. So let's jump right into wow, one more thing first, forgot about this slide. I wanted to tell you all about something else that's state-based. We have launched a grassroots campaign called MDTAPS, which stands for Maryland Tell a Public Servant. And we want to tell public servants in Maryland about public service loan forgiveness especially the limited PSLF waiver that is available until October 31st of this year. MDTAPS is a campaign that has been launched to spread awareness about this time-sensitive opportunity in the waiver that can bring public servants closer to realizing the forgiveness of their federal student loan debt tax-free. If you'd like more information, please do visit our MDTAPS resource page. It's on our website, mccfw.org/MDTAPS. The information that you'll find on the page is not specific to Maryland. It's for any federal student loan borrower who is interested in learning more about public service loan forgiveness and the life-changing opportunity that's presented by the limited PSLF waiver. So we're open to all, but of course, Maryland is our priority. Again, you can view that page, plenty of resources and information in easy to understand language at mccfw.org/MDTAPS. All right, so let's dig into our questions. The first one is about student loan repayment in general. Are student loans going back into repayment on May 1st of 2022? As of right now, May 1st of 2022 is the official date that's out there for federal student loans going back into repayment. I know that there has been a lot of talk in the news about signals not looking as though that date is actually the date, and those signals might be out there, but right now the date that's officially been posted is May 1st of 2022. After that date, the people who have had the benefit of making no payments or not being required to make payments and not having interest accrue through the CARES Act forbearance will be expected to resume their payments. For information about when your payment is due, you would want to log into your loan servicer's portal, or you could log into studentaid.gov and look at the date for each of your loans. So as of right now, May 1st, 2022 is the date that we are going with, but there are some things happening, and I would definitely keep an eye out for you and make updates as soon as we hear anything about whether it will be May 1st or whether that date is going to be extended once again. All right, so next question is about public service loan forgiveness. The question is, I work for a public hospital as a W-2 employee. I have been asked if I want to switch to a 1099 arrangement. Will this affect my PSLF application? So first things first, the PSLF application is the application for public service loan forgiveness. And public service loan forgiveness is a program that's open to federal student loan borrowers who are direct employees of certain types of public service organizations. So that word direct employee is a big deal. So I wanted to break that down just a bit. PSLF requires the borrower to work directly for a qualifying employer. And the language from the Office of Federal Student Aid's website says, if a qualifying employer hired you, pays you, and sends you a Form W-2, which is a wage and tax statement, at the end of each tax year, you are employed by the qualifying employer. So basically, being a W-2 employee means that you are directly employed by that qualifying employer. Now, if you receive a Form 1099, a Form 1099 is a tax form that's usually sent to people who may work for an organization, but they are not exactly employees. They might be treated as contractors or independent contractors. But there's a big difference for the purposes of PSLF between a direct employee and a contractor. So if you are currently a direct employee of the public hospital, then that means you meet those two requirements. You are directly employed by a qualifying organization. However, if you switch from being a direct employee to an employee who receives a Form 1099 instead of a W-2, then you will no longer be considered a direct employee for the purposes of PSLF. So if public service loan forgiveness is something that you are seriously pursuing, then it would not work in your favor to transition from being a direct employee of the qualifying organization to being a 1099 employee. It's akin to going from being a regular hire to being a contractor. And unfortunately, contractors, even contractors who work for government organizations, if a person is a contractor, by virtue of being a contractor, their employment would not be considered eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So I know that going from W-2 to 1099 doesn't seem like a huge deal, because financially things could be the same for you. You're going to be getting paid from the same organization. However, for the purposes of PSLF, you need that direct employment, and being a 1099 employee, unfortunately, does not qualify as direct employment, even if it's for a qualifying organization. All right, let's move on to the next question. I am seeing a lot of refinancing ads. Me too. Should I go with a private lender to get a better interest rate? I am seeing so many refinancing ads. Some of them pop up and say things like, oh, it's a great time to get married. It's a great time to add a patio to your house. In one case, I saw one that said something like, it's a great time to have a child. And all of these are linked to refinancing student loans. So I'm with you right there on seeing the ads. But refinancing, or the choice of whether to refinance, is actually quite a personal decision. It can be pretty complicated. So I have a few questions that I wanted to throw out there for this person to consider. The first question is, what kind of loans do you have? If you have federal loans, then you can consolidate them through the Office of Federal Student Aid on their website at studentaid.gov. That application is available at any time. You can consolidate whenever you'd like to, online for free via studentaid.gov. If you have private student loans, if you were to consolidate them, then you might look for another lender, but the federal government would not be an option for you. If you have private loans, you could consolidate or refinance with another private lender, but you can't take private loans and consolidate them with the federal government. On the other hand, if you have federal loans, you could consolidate them with a private lender, but you'd stand to lose a lot of benefits, including access to programs like public service loan forgiveness. So the first question is, what kind of loans do you have? The second question is, are you interested in PSLF? Normally, that's not number 2 on my list, but because we are in the age of the limited PSLF waiver, I have to ask this question of anyone who is thinking about taking their federal student loans and refinancing them with a private lender. PSLF is a program that is available to certain federal student loan borrowers, but the key word there is federal student loan borrowers. If you take your federal student loans and you decide to consolidate them or refinance them with a private lender, then your new consolidation loan will no longer be a federal student loan. And if the loan is no longer a federal student loan, then you would not be eligible to participate in a program such as public service loan forgiveness. You'd also lose the benefits that are available to federal student loan borrowers. So the third question is, have you entered repayment already? There's some people who might still be in school who are thinking about consolidating their loans or refinancing just so that they can go from having, let's say, 8 different loans to 1 loan. So for the sake of record keeping, consolidation could make things more convenient for them. Instead of having 8 loans, they'd have 1 loan, 1 servicer. So if you have entered repayment already and you already have 1 servicer or several servicers, I really want you to think beyond the record keeping about the timing of it all. If you have not entered repayment just yet, then I might encourage you to sit back, think a bit. I know that the ads are pretty tempting. Sometimes they can have really low rates, but what is the incentive to do the refinance right this moment? If you've already entered repayment, I would encourage you to look at the experience that you've had so far. Look at the terms of your loans, federal loans and private loans, and think about if the interest rate cut is worth changing to another servicer or consolidating the loans in search of savings. Also, what's important about that existing repayment experience is how far into repayment you are. So the next question is, how long do you have until your loans will be paid off? If you were someone who's been in repayment for, let's say, 1 year, then you've got a long way to go probably when it comes to repayment. And if you were to consolidate or refinance your loans, you would only have 1 year of history that would be not wiped out, but you'd be starting over with a new loan at payment number 1. So that 1 year of repayment probably didn't make that big of a dent in your overall student loan debt load. But if you were a person that is, say, 8 years into a 10-year repayment plan, if you refinance or consolidate your loans, you're going to be starting over with a new loan. So now if you choose another 10-year term, you're going to start at payment number 1 on another 10 years. So to pay off the debt would take you now a total of perhaps 18 years instead of 10. So not to say that it wouldn't make sense for some people, but just in general, think about the fact that with regular refinancing, the clock resets on a loan. So you're starting over again, and you could be extending the amount of time that it takes you to pay down the debt by refinancing or consolidating. The 5th question is, what exactly are the interest rates on your loans? When you look at the rates that you're seeing in these ads to refinance, make sure that you take a look at the fine print, because sometimes the rates that are advertised in the largest font happen to be the ones that are only available to the most creditworthy borrowers. They could also be rates that are for a short period of time, and then after that introductory window is over, the rates increase. Sometimes those advertised rates are called teasers because you're lured in by the attractiveness of that initial rate, but over time, the terms change. So look out for the fine print there, but really take a look at the interest rates and see if there is a huge difference between the rates on your current loans and the rate that you might receive on a new refinance loans. Also take a look at any fees that are associated with the process of refinancing, because if the interest rate savings are small and there are fees, then it might not be worth it to refinance at all. And the 6th and final question I have is for you to consider: are you comfortable losing the terms and benefits that are available to federal student loan borrowers? While federal student loans might not have the greatest history in terms of competitive interest rates, there are many benefits that are available for federal and student loan borrowers. For federal student loan borrowers. There's also flexibility there in terms of the types of repayment plans that are available. There are balance-driven plans, which are based on how much you owe, as well as income-driven plans, which are based on household characteristics, such as your adjusted gross income, the number of people in your household, and how you file your taxes. You probably will not find that degree of flexibility with private lenders. Also, if you are in the realm of public service, working for the government or for certain types of not-for-profit organizations, then consolidating or refinancing your federal student loans into a private loan would mean that you would no longer have access to public service loan forgiveness, because once those federal loans become a private loan, you don't get access to federal programs. So refinancing is something to think about. It's right for some people. For some people, it's not the most advantageous thing to do. But before you do it, just look beyond the ads and the interest rates, because I can tell you those ads, they've been popping up in my social media feeds. And of course, I ignore them because it's not for me. But if you're going to consider it, nothing wrong with it. Just make sure that you're looking at it from a holistic view. In terms of your student loans, as well as your personal financial circumstances. So refinancing, totally personal decision. Do whatever works for you. But remember, if you're going from federal to private, then you lose a lot of benefits in the process. And if you're comfortable with that, then hey, maybe refinancing is for you. All right, another question about consolidation. The next question is, my loans are all direct. Should I consolidate them? I plan to apply for PSLF. So this is a person who plans to apply for public service loan forgiveness. They already have direct loans, which are the loans that are eligible for public service loan forgiveness. And they want to know, should they consolidate anyway? Prior to the limited public service loan forgiveness waiver, I would say you don't need to. You just have direct loans. Direct loans are already eligible. So there's really no advantage to consolidating. And I'd even go as far as to say that consolidating could put you at a disadvantage, because when you consolidate under normal circumstances, you're restarting the clock. And if you have worked toward public service loan forgiveness already, the last thing you want to do is reset the clock and cause yourself to have to spend more time and make more payments in order to achieve that loan forgiveness. So I wanted to take a step back first and talk a little bit about consolidation in general, and then we'll look at consolidation when it comes to the limited PSLF waiver. So consolidation, what is it? Consolidation is the process of combining two or more existing loans into one new loan. In some cases, with the federal government, you can consolidate one loan by itself, but usually it's taking more than one loan. Those old loans get paid off and a new loan is originated for the same amount as the original loans that were consolidated. There's several reasons why people might want to consolidate. The first one I hear frequently is easier record keeping. If you have 4 servicers, then you have to make 4 payments each month. And for some people, that's just a bit much. So they might decide that they want to consolidate their loans. So then instead of having 4 servicers, 4 points of contact, 4 payments each month, now they have one bill, one loan, one payment to make each month. It's a lot easier to keep track of one payment as opposed to 4. The second reason for consolidation is for some people to gain eligibility for public service loan forgiveness. Some borrowers who have the older variety of loans, such as FFEL loans and Perkins loans, those loans were not eligible for public service loan forgiveness, but they could be consolidated into a direct loan, and then that direct loan would be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So for some people, they wanted in on public service loan forgiveness, but they had ineligible loan types. For them, they consolidated so that they could get that direct consolidation loan and get on track for public service loan forgiveness. Another reason for consolidation is for people who are in search of savings via a lower interest rate. When it comes to federal student loans, this is not applicable. With federal student loans, consolidation results in you having one loan out of those old existing loans, they're paid off, one new loan is originated, and the interest rate on that new loan is the weighted average of the interest rates on those older loans that you consolidated into the new one. So there really isn't an opportunity to reap interest rate savings by consolidating through the federal government. However, if you were to take your federal loans and go to a private lender, there's a possibility that you could receive a loan with a better interest rate. But if you do that, just remember, going from federal to private, you lose access to all benefits that are available to federal student loan borrowers. So let's take a step back and look at what consolidation looks like with the numbers. Let's say you have 2 loans. The first loan is for $30,000. The second loan is for $40,000. If you were to consolidate those loans, the $30,000 and $40,000 loans would be paid off, and a new loan for the amount of $70,000 would be originated. So overall, the level of debt that the borrower has not changed, but the packaging is different. It's now 2 loans into 1, 2 servicers down to 1. So they're definitely easier record keeping because there's 1 loan, 1 point of contact, 1 bill to pay. Now, let's talk about direct loans in the limited PSLF waiver. So if you're a borrower who already has all direct loans, then you don't need to consolidate for the purposes of gaining eligibility for public service loan forgiveness. You already have direct loans. So just reviewing those possible reasons to consolidate, of course, easier record keeping still stands. Gaining eligibility for PSLF now says gaining credit for past payments toward PSLF. And also placing loans with different repayment histories on the same PSLF clock. Here's an example. If we take those same 2 loans, the $30,000 loan and the $40,000 loan, and we just look at the number of months that they have in repayment history, they could be counted toward public service loan forgiveness. The first loan has 50 months. The second loan has 100 months. Through the limited waiver, you could consolidate those 2 direct loans, and the consolidation loan would be given credit for the higher number of months when looking at those two original loans. The specific language from the Office of Federal Student Aid says that with the waiver, your consolidation will receive credit for time in repayment on your loans with different counts. Your consolidation loan will be credited with at least the largest number of payments on the loans that were consolidated. So in this case, you have one loan that has 50 months of repayment history. You have a second loan that has 100 months of repayment history. The direct consolidation loan would be given credit for at least 100 months toward the PSLF count, provided that the borrower worked for a qualifying employer directly for all of those months, okay? So this is why some people who have direct loans are asking, should I consolidate my loans? Anyway, I know they're direct, so I don't need to consolidate my loans, but could it help if I did consolidate my loans? And the answer is yes. It could help you, again, take these loans that are on different repayment clocks. For some people who went to undergraduate and took out loans and then took some time off and then came back or went on to get another degree. For PSLF under the original rules, you would have loans that were on two different clocks. So if you had a gap in borrowing, then you would have to apply for PSLF more than once because your loans are on different repayment clocks. But through the waiver, you can consolidate those loans, and the consolidated loan would receive credit for that largest number of payments after looking at the loans that were consolidated. So personal choice, if it works in your favor, why not consolidate? But if you have direct loans, it's not necessary for you to consolidate to get access to forgiveness through the waiver or for additional credit on past payments. All right, next question. I received a letter from the PSLF servicer that says I only have 2 qualifying payments. I have worked in public service for 8 years. Why is the count so low? All right, this question, this is a loaded question. There could be a lot of reasons for this, so I wanted to dissect it just a bit more. So in looking at the results from the servicer's count, this person said that they have 2 payments. For public service loan forgiveness, you are required to have 120 payments while you were working in public service in order to have your debt forgiven. To be on track, you just need to be making progress toward the 120. But 120 is what it takes to get the forgiveness. So this person says they have 2 payments. That means that they would need 118 more months to reap the benefit of forgiveness. So the question I have here is, since there's such a large gap, there's 8 years of work in public service, but only 2 qualifying payments. The first question I have is, have you submitted more than 1 application? 1 PSLF application has to be submitted for each public service employer that you've worked for in order to gain credit for all of your months of employment. So if you have worked for, say, 4 different employers over the course of those 8 years, then you would need to fill out 4 different applications to verify your employment for all of those organizations. After you fill out those 4 applications, you would need to submit all 4. If you submitted all 4 at the same time, then I would think that the count would be updated pretty quickly. But if you submitted them over time, then the gap could just mean that the servicer has not had a chance to review all of your applications just yet. The other possibility is that there could have been an error on one of the applications. You'll hear about that if that's the case later. But I've seen things like this when a person has work history for more than 1 organization, or when a person has taken a long time to send in another PSLF application. It's recommended that you send in the PSLF application to verify your employment every 12 months and when you change jobs. So if the last time you submitted one of those applications to verify your employment was 5 years ago, then the servicer would not know that you still were building more months of qualifying employment. So have you submitted more than 1 application? And if so, contact the servicer to ask if they've had a chance to review all of the applications. Just find out what information they're working with. Second question, was, did you consolidate prior to submitting applications to certify your employment? I asked this because with the waiver, when the waiver first came out in October, a lot of people were wondering, what should I do first? Should I fill out the application for PSLF so that the servicer can begin counting my months of qualifying employment? Or should I consolidate my loans first so that I can get everything together to get on track for the waiver? So there was uncertainty among borrowers about the process. What was the most efficient process to getting that count updated for PSLF through the waiver? But we've since learned that it is more efficient to consolidate first, and then after the consolidation loan has been originated, submit the PSLF application to initiate the count. I know that some people are leery of that suggestion because they don't want to waste time. They want to get in the queue as quickly as possible. But if you submit an application before consolidation, then it's possible, again, that there's just a lag in the paperwork and that the servicer will have to go back and perhaps recount the number of months you have toward the 120 that are necessary for achieving public service loan forgiveness. The third question is also about timing. Did the PSLF servicer use the original program rules to evaluate your application instead of the limited PSLF waiver rules? And I know some people will look at this question and say, why would they do that? But the reason is that even though the waiver was announced in October, we're only in March. And so it definitely took some time for the servicer to implement the rules of the waiver when making their counts of qualifying payments. So for some people who filed their applications early on, right after the waiver was announced, it's quite possible that you received a letter that said you were rejected or your count was the same as it was before, even though new rules went into effect. So it could be that you were in the queue at that time where the waiver had been announced, but it wasn't being applied. The rules of it were not being applied to borrower applications that were submitted soon after that announcement. So in that case, you may have to apply again. And then that leads me to the last question. Is there a big difference between eligible payments and qualifying payments? I know big, that could be relative, but if you're looking at the report, usually after you apply and the servicer has reviewed your application, they'll send you a letter that lists your loans and lists a few columns, but two of them are qualifying payments and eligible payments. For many people, the eligible payments figure is larger than the qualifying payments. The qualifying payments figure is the one that that's the official one that they're comparing to the number 120. So for this person, they had two qualifying payments. They said they've been in public service working for 8 years. 8 times 12 is 96. So that's a maximum possibility of 96 months if we're approximating this. So if their paper said 96 eligible payments and 2 qualifying payments, then that would make me think there's definitely some employment history that has yet to be verified, because they've got 96 payments, but they can't match the payments with a relevant employment history. So that to me would make me think you need to go back and make sure that the servicer has your employment history up to date, and that may require you to submit another PSLF application to verify your employment and get that count up. All right, next question. I took the PSLF application to my department's HR representative and they refused to sign the paperwork. What should I do now? This is something that I have heard before for a number of reasons. Some people are just not too keen on putting their signature on something that they're unfamiliar with or something that they do not understand. So it's as the applicant, it's nothing that you did wrong, I'm pretty sure. It's probably just a person who's unfamiliar with the process and doesn't want to sign their name to something that they don't understand. So let's talk about what it takes for a person to be able to sign that PSLF application. PSLF requires an authorized official to verify employment. According to FSA, your employment can be certified by an official who has access to your employment or service records and is authorized by your employer to certify your employment. So this official, all they have to be able to verify are a few things. First, your start and your end date, or if you're currently employed by the organization at the time that you submit the application. Second is your employment status, whether you're full-time or part-time. And third is your average hours worked per week. So it's not that an authorized official has to be a person of a certain level within an organization, or that it even has to be someone who's in human resources. It's just someone in the organization that can verify that you work there and when, if you are full-time or part-time, and the average number of hours you work per week. Organizations can be set up in different ways. Some have HR concentrated in a central office. Others have a combination of central HR office and decentralized HR departments. So there could be many people within your organization that meet the standard for what makes an authorized official. But I want to just tell you all, like, there is no like certification to be an authorized official. Like, you're not going to walk in to an office and find somebody with a sign that says, I'm the PSLF authorized official. I don't think you will, at least. So it's not like a certification that a person has to get. It's not some, stamp of official approval that comes from the Department of Education. It's a person within an organization that can verify your employment. Think of this as like if you had applied for a job and someone was calling your old employer to verify your employment. That's the nature of the information: start and end date, full-time or part-time status, and average hours worked per week. So with that definition, there are many people within the organization that could serve as an authorized official. If you are unable to find someone willing to sign, there's also an option on the PSLF application. There's a box you can check that says you're unable to get an authorized official to verify your employment. So there's a process in place for that through the Department of Education and their PSLF servicer. But hopefully you'll be able to go back, share a little bit with the person about the PSLF program, and let them know this is all they have to verify. Signing this form doesn't put them on the hook for your loans. I've heard that before. Doesn't make them, liable to pay anything. It's just an employment verification. And once they understand that that's what it is, people are more prone to go ahead and cooperate. All right, so I wanted to review public service loan forgiveness under the original rules, because after the waiver expires, which we expect to happen October 31st of 2002, the old rules of the program are scheduled to go back into effect. And so I really want to impress upon everyone the huge difference between the limited PSLF waiver and the original rules of PSLF. So the picture that you're looking at is actually pulled from the Office of Federal Student Aid, and it shows the 5 requirements of public service loan forgiveness. First, you have to make 120 qualifying payments. Second, those payments have to be made on direct loans. Third, those payments have to be made while you're enrolled in one of the qualifying repayment plans. Fourth, all of the first 3 requirements have to be met while you're working for a qualifying employer. Fifth, and finally, you need to remain working for a qualifying employer at the time when you apply for PSLF and at the time that you receive PSLF. So those are the 5 qualifications. And if you meet all 5, then you could have your federal student loan debt forgiven tax-free. So let's take a look at these qualifications one by one. The first one is that you have to make a minimum of 120 monthly payments. Only payments after October 1st of 2007 count toward public service loan forgiveness. The payments also must be made on time and in full. If you make multiple partial payments in a month, they will still count as one payment. So there's no way that you're going to pay extra and make the time go by any faster. You're looking at a minimum of 120 months altogether. The payments do not need to be consecutive. So if you change jobs, as long as you stay within public service, you can get credit for all the months where you were employed for a qualifying employer and making those payments. If you have gaps in employment, the payments made during those gaps wouldn't count, but you wouldn't lose credit for the payments that you made prior to the gap. Also, the months of the CARES Act forbearance that we've been in since March of 2020 should count toward the 120 payments necessary for public service loan forgiveness, provided that you are or have been working for a qualifying employer throughout the forbearance. Requirement number 2 is qualifying loan types. All direct loans are eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So I've listed the varieties of direct loans. You've got subsidized, unsubsidized, plus loan for graduate professional students, direct parent plus loan, and the direct consolidation loans. If you're interested in consolidating, again, you can do that at studentaid.gov. Log in, the application is there, it's free. You can complete it online by yourself at any time. Next is requirement number 3, qualifying repayment plans. The qualifying repayment plans include all of the income-driven repayment plans. That's income-based repayment, income contingent repayment, pay-as-you-earn, and revised pay-as-you-earn. The other plans that qualify are the 10-year standard plan and also other plans for which the monthly payment is greater than the 10-year standard plan payment. That doesn't happen too often, but still qualifying. The 10-year standard plan is listed there, not for people who have started on the 10-year standard plan and plan to see it through, because at the end of 10 years, they'll have nothing left to forgive. But for some people who are on income-driven plans, there's a possibility that as they progress throughout their career or over time in general, their earnings just could increase. And at some point, their earnings might have increased so much so that the payment under one of the income-driven plans is actually greater than the payment on a 10-year standard plan. And if that's the case, they could leave the income-driven plan and finish up on the 10-year standard plan. And once they reach 120, apply for public service loan forgiveness. The income-driven plans are the ones that are most likely to yield a balance for forgiveness. Any of the 10-year plans, such as the standard plan, the 10-year graduated plan, at the end of 120 months, you'd have nothing left to forgive. So the income-driven plans are the ones that typically leave borrowers with an amount to forgive after they've made 120 payments. You'll notice there's an asterisk next to income contingent repayment. And on the previous slide, there was an asterisk next to parent plus loans, direct parent plus loans. The asterisk is there because the income-driven plans are most likely to yield a balance, but for parents, there's only one income-driven plan available to them to repay on direct plus loans, and that plan is the income contingent repayment plan. So if you're a parent and you have only parent plus loans, you're interested in public service loan forgiveness, then the income contingent repayment plan would be the only income-driven plan available to you for the repayment of those parent plus loans. All right, let's take a look at requirement number 4. That is qualifying employment. And for that, I would like for you to walk away with this. It's where you work that matters. Your actual job title does not matter. So where you work matters more than what you do. Where you work, the following types of organizations are qualifying employers. Government, from federal government, state government, county, local, tribal government agencies qualify for public service loan forgiveness as qualifying employers. 501c3 tax-exempt organizations are qualifying employers, and other not-for-profit organizations that provide qualifying services to the public. So it's about the organization. It's not about your role within the organization. You also need to be a direct employee. There's also a requirement to be a full-time employee, and full-time means the greater of either your employer's definition of full-time or an average of 30 hours per week. You could also work in multiple part-time jobs that equal full-time employment, provided that each job is for a qualifying employer. Quick note that applies to members of the clergy. For borrowers at nonprofit organizations, any hours that were spent in religious instruction, worship services, or proselytizing did not count for public service loan forgiveness until that restriction was eliminated as of July 1st, 2021. So now it's easier for members of the clergy to pursue public service loan forgiveness without having to parse up their hours between which activities were, for the general public and which activities were involved. They were strictly faith-based or recruiting people to join the faith. All right, our fifth requirement is qualifying employment and timing. Borrowers must remain working in a public service career at the time that their PSLF application is submitted and at the time that loan forgiveness is received. So for a person who had worked, let's say 15 years for a qualifying employer, but didn't hear about public service loan forgiveness until after they had left that organization, they would not be eligible for public service loan forgiveness under the original rules, because borrowers are required to remain in public service at the time that they file the application and at the time forgiveness is received. So, given those 5 qualifications and how they all have to be working together, there should not be any shock that 98% of borrowers who applied for PSLF have been rejected, and that was between late 2017 and 2021. The government created another program called Temporary Expanded PSLF, which counted payments that were made under an ineligible repayment plan. Unfortunately, that program had a similar rejection rate. Then came the Limited PSLF Waiver, which was announced in October of 2021. So if we look at the number of people who were approved between 2018 and 2021, it was about 16,000 people. If we look at the number of people who were approved between October 21st and January 2022, just a span of a few months, the number increased to 54,000. And that is a direct result of the implementation of the Limited PSLF Waiver. So this slide is probably the most meaningful one of the presentation if you're interested in just understanding what the true difference is between public service loan forgiveness and public service loan forgiveness through the Limited PSLF Waiver. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the requirements of public service loan forgiveness under the original rules. We have 5: 120 monthly payments on direct loans only, while enrolled in qualifying repayment plans and while working for a qualifying employer throughout the 120 months and at the time that a person submits the PSLF application and receives forgiveness. In the middle, you have temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness. 4 of the 5 original PSLF requirements remain. That's that you still have to have made 120 monthly payments on direct loans only while working for a qualifying employer and when you were applying for and receiving PSLF. Now, take a look at that Limited PSLF Waiver. We have gone from 5 requirements to 4 requirements down to 2. In the first one, you'll notice that there's a difference in the terms. We went from 120 monthly payments to 120 periods of repayment. So now we're just looking at months instead of monthly payments. The other requirement that remains is that those 120 periods of repayment need to overlap with while a person was working for a qualifying employer. So it doesn't matter if a person had direct loans, it doesn't matter what repayment plan they were paying under, and it doesn't matter if they've left public service. What matters is if you can look back and see 120 periods of repayment while working for a qualifying employer, then that means the borrower has satisfied the requirements for public service loan forgiveness. Now, I want to clarify that if you don't have 120 periods of repayment just yet, that doesn't mean that the waiver cannot help you. The waiver can help you get credit for past payments that you've made. So if you have 60 months of past payments that were previously ineligible because you were paying on the wrong types of loans, you can consolidate those loans through this waiver and you can get credit for those 60 months. If you were a person that never applied for public service loan forgiveness because you thought, I can't afford payments under the eligible repayment plans, you could still go back and apply and potentially get past credit. It's just, to me, the difference is just so stark when you look at that list of 5 requirements and the 2 that are applicable to the waiver. Just 120 periods of repayment while working for a qualifying employer. If you have any periods of repayment, that means a month when your loans were in a repayment status. If you have any of those months while you were working for a qualifying employer, please apply. Apply through the waiver so that you can get the maximum amount of credit on those past payments. Okay. So under the new rules, any prior payment will count as a qualifying payment, regardless of the loan type, regardless of the repayment plan, or whether the payment was made on time or in full. What the Department of Education is looking at is your loan repayment, your loan status history, your loan status history. So if they look back and they can see that your loans were in a repayment status, that meets the requirement. And what they're going to do is look at your employment history, your loan status history to look for overlap to get you to the 120 months that are required for PSLF. So this change through the waiver will apply to student loan borrowers who have direct loans, those who have already consolidated into the direct loan program, and those who consolidate into the direct loan program by October 31st of 2022. So October 31st of 2022 is the date to beat. Lastly, Parent Plus loans alone are not eligible under the Limited PSLF waiver. If you have Parent Plus loans that you borrowed for a child and student loans that you borrowed for your own education, then you could consider consolidating all of those loans to gain access to additional credit toward PSLF through the waiver. So Parent Plus loans by themselves are not eligible for consideration under the waiver. But if you have student loans for yourself and Parent Plus loans that you borrowed for your child's education, then you might want to look into consolidating, because if you do consolidate those loans, the language that the Department of Education has out there is that they will ignore the repayment history of the Parent Plus loan. They would look only at the history of the loans that you took out for yourself as a student, but the history of that loan, that number of months could be applied to the entire consolidation loan. So again, if you have Parent Plus loans that you took out for a child and student loans that you took out for yourself, you may want to look into consolidation to get all of those loans on one accord and considered through the waiver. So what should you do next? Please remember that the PSLF, the Limited PSLF waiver is a time-sensitive opportunity. It expires on October 31st of 2022. We've got 3 steps here. The first one is to know your loans. You can look at your loan portfolio by visiting studentaid.gov, logging in. You want to look at all of your loans to determine what kinds of loans you have. If you have all direct loans, there is no need to consolidate, but you might want to consider it. But if you have FFEL loans, Perkins loans, non-direct loans, you would have to consolidate them to gain access to getting credit for past payments through the waiver. So if you have the older types of loans, you have a decision to make. If you want PSLF, then you'd have to consolidate. So to consolidate, you want to go to studentaid.gov. Again, complete the consolidation application by October 31st of 2022 if you want to be considered through the waiver. The third thing everyone has to do, and that is to certify your employment. I highly recommend visiting studentaid.gov/PSLF and taking a look at the PSLF help tool. If you're wondering if your employer is a qualifying employer, log into the PSLF help tool, enter their tax ID number, and you will be able to see if the employer is eligible. If you work for an organization that is not government and is not a 501c3 organization, but it's still tax exempt and performs qualifying public services, it's possible that when you enter the tax ID number, it will not come up as eligible within the PSLF help tool. That doesn't mean that it's not a qualifying employer. It could mean that no one else from there has applied yet. So you would be the one to make the case for it being a qualifying employer, and there's a process for that. So if you don't see it in the as eligible when you're using the PSLF help tool, don't necessarily give up. You might just have to do a bit more work to prove that your employer is indeed a qualifying employer for the purposes of PSLF. If you don't use the help tool, there is a paper application available. You can find it via studentaid.gov/PSLF. Either way, you'll probably end up using the paper. You don't have to use the paper version. You can do it digitally. However, there are requirements for the types of signatures that are accepted on the PSLF application. If your authorizing official is going to sign, they can't just type in a signature. They would need to actually, it would need to actually be like the stroke of a pen or the stylus. So for that reason, some people just opt for the paper form. But either way, you've got the help tool option, which will help you populate the form before you send it off, or the paper version that you can fill out on paper and take in to have an authorized official complete. Make sure if you want access to the waiver, you complete the consolidation if you have to, and the employment certification by October 31st of 2022. Just want to share before I wrap up a few informational resources for borrowers. Of course, studentaid.gov is the place to go to view your loans, to consolidate if you need to, and to also access the PSLF help tool and the paper application. Some additional resources include the Institute of Student Loan Advisors at freestudentloanadvice.org, as well as the Student Borrower Protection Center at protectborrowers.org. Right, I have a couple more questions here. How do I know if I qualify? Well, the answer is your employment and repayment history must qualify. You have to have loans that were in a repayment status, and you have to have worked for a qualifying employer. And remember, you don't have to have 120 to be on track for this program. If you have the 120, then that means that really the only thing standing between you and having your debt forgiven is this application. If you don't have the 120, it's quite possible that you complete the application and you end up getting credit for past payments and getting closer to the 120 months than you are right now. You have to do your part and certify your employment by completing the PSLF application, and then the Department of Education will evaluate your repayment history to look back at those loans and see how many months were those loans in a repayment status. What should I do next and when? It depends on the types of loans you have. For everyone, if you want to take advantage of the waiver, you need to apply by October 31st of 2022. If you have non-direct loans, then you have one more step, and that step is to consolidate your loans before October 31st of 2022. So take a look at those 3 steps. Know your loans, decide if you're going to consolidate, and certify your employment, but make sure you do all 3 before October 31st of 2022. And before I go, I have to say again, Maryland TAPS, MDTAPS. Maryland, tell a public servant about public service loan forgiveness, specifically the Limited PSLF Waiver. This is truly a life-changing opportunity. And at the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness, we want to spread the word far and wide. Our focus is Maryland, but we want everyone who may be eligible for this opportunity to know about it and to know the steps they need to take in order to get closer to achieving that forgiveness through PSLF. You can visit us online at mccfw.org/MDTAPS. There's even a space for you to take the pledge to tell a public servant about the Limited PSLF Waiver. So join the campaign. It doesn't matter what state you're in. Just tweet about PSLF and use the hashtag MDTAPS so that we can continue to spread the word far and wide about the Limited PSLF Waiver. I've been checking socials throughout. I haven't seen any questions come up yet. I don't see any in the Zoom chat queue. We got about 2 minutes left. So if you have any questions, please do get those in. If you think of questions after the fact, you can reach out to us via social media. We're on Facebook at the MCCFW. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at the MCCFW. Our website also has contact forms, mccfw.org. You can submit your questions and also tell us about the student loan issues and even issues around higher ed financing altogether. Which issues are most important to you, which ones you want to learn more about, and those will help inform our decisions as we continue to build out our resource libraries and offer additional programs and services. So mccfw.org, check us out. I'm going to look and see if we have any questions. I don't see any questions on Facebook. We're at about 7:59, so I will hang out for the next 60 seconds and give you a couple of reminders. One is that office hours is a semi-monthly free virtual student loan clinic to help Marylanders and others navigate student loan repayment and prepare for success, financial success beyond repayment. We happen 2 Wednesdays per month, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You can join us by registering through Zoom and submitting your questions in advance, or watching the broadcast live on Facebook. After we wrap up the live sessions, we upload these videos to YouTube and add chapters so that if you missed it, you can look at the chapters and go straight to the question that is relevant to you instead of trying to watch the whole video and find that. So make sure that you also visit our channel on YouTube, the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. You can find archives of office hours notated with the chapters so you can get directly to the content that means the most to you. We also have video content from our 2021 symposium that was in July of last year. And that reminds me to tell you to save the date for our virtual symposium 2.0, which will be held on July 26th of this year. It looks like I am at the 8 o'clock mark. I see a comment from my Aunt Paulette, Auntie P. She says, sharing and thank you. Thank you so much for joining me, Auntie P, and for leaving a comment. I appreciate you. And with that, what a perfect note to end on. It's 8 o'clock. I thank you so much for joining me again. My name is Dr. Tisa Silver Kennedy. I'm the founder and director of the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. Visit us online at mccfw.org and socials. And until the next office hours, I wish you well. And good night.